Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We're going to go over our laser cutting settings for this particular project. And I'm just going to move this down because I noticed that there's a line all the way through it. But we've got our files already set up, which is great. And I'm just going to delete this one line here. And I'm going to go back to my Layers tab. And you notice I'm also working on a PC. And this PC is actually in the Fastener Lab. It is the PC right next to the laser cutter and engraver. And this is the one that we're going to use. So what I'm looking at right here, I just want to check to make sure my material is set to no print, which is great. It is, and we'll see why that is the case in a second. But everything's ready to go, which is where we want to be. So in order to input our settings, I'm going to come up to File, and I'm going to come up to Print. And the laser cutter is super awesome because it's almost exactly like a printer in that we can just set up the printing properties and go from there. And in my destination, I want to make sure the Helix is selected. That is the laser cutter engraver we're using. And I'm going to just start off going to properties, and this dialog box is going to come up, and then we can kind of go from there and edit our properties. Now, I'm only going to do a vector job type, which here is, I've got raster, I've got vector, and I've got combined. Now, raster is specifically for engraving, and that works very similar to a printer. And the fact that a printer head would go back and forth, and lay down ink. Where instead, here, the laser head, or the lenses that direct the laser, are going to move back and forth and engrave an image or whatever you need to. Vector follows a path. Essentially, it follows a curve. And that's why we chose the single line font, because when it follows a curve, it's not taking up so much time to engrave all the numbers and everything. So it's going to be faster if we just keep everything to vector. And what we're also going to do is we're going to make sure autofocus is on. And I describe this much like a microscope. You know, you always need to focus your microscope and move that bed up and down, or wherever your sample is that you're trying to look at. And the laser needs to do the same thing. The bed needs to move up and down so that the lens is in focus, and that can change based on your material thickness. So if I have a different material, like a big block of wood that I want to engrave something in, that's going to be thicker than, say, this thin cardstock that we're going to be using. So for right now, just make sure that autofocus is on. Now, our piece size that's the material size we're going to use. Your material size can be totally different, but for now, we're just going to stick with 24 by 18, which is the max bed size. Now, our vector settings and our raster settings, these can be found on a sheet that is in the Fastener Lab. It can be found on a file on the desktop, and it can be found online on the Fastener Lab website. But for the chipboard, a cardstock that we're using, we are going to have a 65% speed. Our power is going to be 98. Now, we never want to go up to 100%. We always want to leave, 2% or so. And the reason we do that is that just helps keep the laser alive longer. If we were to max this out every time, then we would wear out the device that generates the laser beam over and over again. And frequency, unfortunately, we can't actually type in the frequency. I don't know why, but we can use the slider bar, and we're going to say 750-ish. And I say ish because you can see I'm just doing little subtle movements. Oh, look at that. And it's changing by a factor of 20 to 10. So that's why it's just 750-ish. And so these are the settings that we're going to use, and these vector settings are specific to the material. And same thing with raster settings, that's also specific to the material. Now, one thing I'm going to add is that This setting right here is to cut through the material. If I hit OK and go to my view and output properties, sorry, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but when I go to view and output scale, I'm going to set where I'm viewing my material or viewing what is going to be cut. So right now it's blank because the box is probably somewhere off. We also want to make sure that we're in a 1-to-1 scale here because we want to make this to scale, right? So 1 inch equals 1 inch. So I'm going to hit set, and you can see the box is over here. Now I want to make sure to select that center dot. You see how it highlights yellow? If I were to select some of these other dots, it's going to ask us to rescale, and I don't want to do that. I want to move it around. And so when I select the center dot, then I can move it around. Now what's also helpful is having my center snap on, so I can move that square close to our material layer, our material outline, so that I can move it to its proper location. And I'll click there and hit enter. Now you see how everything's black? Now if I were to move forward and hit print, the laser would cut out those numbers, and we don't want them to cut out the numbers. We want them to be engraved. So what I can do is I can come back to properties, and I can come to color mapping, and I can turn color mapping on. And this will allow us to change settings for objects that are different colors. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I turn color mapping on. I'm going to go through and change these settings for red because our engraving letters are red. And on the sheet for vector engraving, I have 65 speed, 15 power, and 750-ish frequency. Right there. Nope. You can go over, it's fine. And I'm going to turn raster off, air assist we want on for sure. And then to input these settings, I have to go into this big arrow here. I'm just going to hit that big arrow over. Now what's also important is you want to make sure that your RGB codes are correct. And that's why when I changed the color of these numbers down here, I changed them, if you notice, changed them directly all the way to red. And that's just to keep things nice and easy. You can do other colors like yellow as these, and you can, have a lot of different variations and a lot of different colors for different settings. But for right now, we're just keeping it easy just so we get familiar with the process. So I'm going to hit OK, and you can see these are not coming up red. So what I might have to look at is what exactly are these numbers right here. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to ungroup all of these. And then I'm going to have to come up to edit, select objects, and I'm going to go by color, select this guy, and then I'm going to come to my properties tab and see right here is print color. See that I didn't change that. There's something very important to make sure you think about is when I edited these original objects in my folder, or when I was back making them, I didn't change the color for the print color. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to change that to red. Okay, and so now I can come back to File, Print, and those should pop up as red. Okay, so that's something just to be very clear about. And now that I've got these settings, what I can do is can check with the lab manager about making sure that these are correct and everything's there, and then I can load my material into the laser, which I'll show you in another video, and then I can hit print. Okay, so that's it for this video, and that's it for our labs. There'll be another video that's already been made a while ago, and we'll go over this in class as well. So I will see you all soon.